My husband abandoned me and our children after I had donated a kidney to save his life. I don't normally share personal stories, but this one needs to be told. My name isn't important. What is important is what happened to me, to us, and how completely wrong I was about the man I married. It began on a Tuesday morning in March. For weeks, my husband had been feeling tired, complaining about back pain and nausea. I kept telling him to see a doctor, but you know how men can be as stubborn as mules about their health. Finally, when he could barely get out of bed, I practically dragged him to the emergency room. The doctor who examined him was young, maybe in his early 30s, with kind eyes that couldn't hide his concern. After running blood tests and scans, he asked us to sit down in his office. Those words you never want to hear came tumbling out. Kidney failure, advanced stage, immediate intervention required. Without a transplant, the doctor explained, his voice gentle but firm, we're looking at months, not years. The waiting list for a deceased donor can be 3 to 5 years. Your best option is finding a living donor. Someone close to you who's willing and compatible. My husband just stared at the wall, his face as pale as paper. Our 2 kids, 8 and 10 years old, were at school completely unaware their father was dying. I remember thinking how I would tell them, how I would hold our family together through this nightmare. I want to be tested, I said immediately, reaching for his hand. I'm his wife. Test me first. The doctor nodded, already reaching for paperwork. We'll need to run comprehensive tests. Blood work, imaging, psychological evaluation. It's major surgery for you too, with real risks. My husband finally looked at me, tears in his eyes. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I told him, squeezing his hand. I'm telling you I'm going to do it. That night, after we'd somehow managed to have dinner with the kids without falling apart, we lay in bed talking. He kept apologizing as if getting sick was his fault. I kept reassuring him that we'd get through this together like we always had. What if something happens to you during surgery? He whispered in the dark. Nothing will happen, I promised, though my heart was racing with fear. I'm strong and I love you. That's enough. 3 days later, I was at the hospital for my first round of testing. Blood type, tissue compatibility, kidney function. Test after test to see if I could save my husband's life. The transplant coordinator, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, explained everything in detail. Living donor surgery is generally safe, but there are risks. Infection, bleeding, even death in rare cases. You'll live normally with 1 kidney, but you'll need regular checkups for the rest of your life. I signed every form without hesitation. My husband sat beside me, quiet and grateful, holding my free hand as I wrote my name over and over. 2 weeks of waiting felt like 2 years. Finally, the call came while I was making breakfast. The coordinator's voice was warm with good news. You're a perfect match. We can schedule surgery within the month. I hung up and turned to my husband, who was reading the newspaper at our kitchen table. We're compatible, I said simply. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. And then he was holding me, crying into my shoulder like I'd never seen him cry before. Thank you, he kept saying. Thank you for saving my life. At that moment, surrounded by his love and gratitude, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. I was going to save my husband, keep our family intact, and we'd have decades ahead of us to grow old together. If only I'd known what was coming. The next month was a whirlwind of medical appointments, forms, and preparations. I had to go through psychological evaluations to make sure I wasn't being coerced, which seemed ridiculous to me. Who could coerce someone into major surgery? But I understood they had to be thorough. The psychologist, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s, asked me endless questions about my marriage, my motivations, my fears. Are you certain this is your decision? She asked during our final session. Completely certain, I replied. He's my husband, the father of my children. This isn't even a question for me. Meanwhile, my husband's condition was deteriorating rapidly. He started dialysis 3 times a week, spending hours hooked up to machines that kept him alive but left him exhausted and weak. I watched this strong man who used to play basketball with our kids in the driveway struggle to climb the stairs to our bedroom. Our families rallied around us. My mother flew in from Oregon to help with the kids, and his parents drove up from the south every weekend. Everyone kept telling me how brave I was, how incredible it was that I was willing to make such a sacrifice, but it never felt like a sacrifice to me. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. "You don't have to do this," my father-in-law said to me one evening as we watched my husband sleep in his chair, too tired to make it to bed. "There might be other options." "There are no other options," I told him firmly. "And even if there were, I'd still choose this." The surgery was scheduled for a Thursday in late April. 2 days before, we had to be at the hospital for final pre-op procedures. As we sat in the waiting room, my husband took my hand. "I want you to know something," he said quietly. "If the roles were reversed, I'm not sure I'd be brave enough to do what you're doing." I looked at him surprised. "Of course you would." He shook his head. "I don't know. What you're doing is beyond anything I could have asked for. You're literally giving me life." The night before surgery, we put the kids to bed together, reading them extra stories and holding them a little longer than usual. They knew Daddy was having an operation, but we'd kept the details simple. Mommy was helping Daddy get better. Our 10-year-old, always too smart for his own good, looked up at me as I tucked him in. "Are you scared, Mom?" "A little," I admitted. "But I'm more excited that Daddy is going to feel better soon." "You're the best mom in the world," he said, hugging me tight. Our daughter, sweet and fierce like me, was more direct. "After Daddy gets better, can we get a dog?" I laughed despite everything. "We'll talk about it." That last night, my husband and I stayed up late talking about everything. Our hopes for after the surgery, vacation plans for the summer, college funds for the kids. Normal life things that felt precious because we'd almost lost them. "I love you more than I've ever loved anything," he told me as we finally turned out the lights. "I love you too," I whispered back. "Now get some sleep. We have a big day tomorrow." I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there thinking about the surgery, about recovery, about our future. I thought about growing old with this man, watching our children graduate and get married, becoming grandparents together. The morning of surgery, I woke up before the alarm. My husband was already awake, staring at the ceiling. "Ready?" I asked. "Thanks to you," he said, turning to kiss my forehead. "Ready." As we drove to the hospital in the pre-dawn darkness, I had no idea that I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. The morning of surgery felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. We arrived at the hospital at 5:30 a.m., and the staff immediately separated us for prep. I kissed my husband goodbye in the hallway, not knowing when I'd see him again. "See you on the other side," I whispered against his lips. "Thank you for my life," he whispered back. The pre-op area was cold and sterile. A nurse with gentle hands helped me into a hospital gown and started my 4. The surgeon, a confident man in his 40s who'd performed hundreds of these procedures, came to review everything one final time. "Any last questions?" he asked, clipboard in hand. "Just take good care of both of us," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The anesthesiologist was a woman about my age with kind eyes. "Count backward from 10, she said as the medication flowed into my 4. 10, 9, 8. And then nothing. I woke up hours later in recovery, groggy and confused. The first thing I felt was pain. A deep, aching pain in my side where they had removed my kidney. A recovery nurse was checking my vitals. "How did it go?" I managed to ask, my mouth dry as cotton. "Perfectly," she smiled. "Your kidney is already functioning beautifully in your husband. You're a hero." Hero. The word felt strange. I'd just done what any wife would do. The next few hours were a blur of pain medication, vital sign checks, and visits from doctors. My husband was in recovery too, but they wouldn't let me see him yet. My mother and his parents took turns sitting with me, bringing updates. "He's doing wonderfully," his mother told me, tears in her eyes. "The color is already coming back to his face. You saved our son." By evening, they finally wheeled me to see him. He was awake, sitting up slightly in his hospital bed, and he looked better than he had in months. The grayish pallor was gone, replaced by healthy pink skin. "Hi, beautiful," he said softly when he saw me. I started crying from relief, from pain, from pure emotion. The nurses positioned our beds, so we could hold hands. His grip was stronger than it had been in weeks. "I can already feel the difference," he told me. "I feel like I can breathe again, like I'm actually alive." My recovery was harder than expected. What should have been a 3-day hospital stay stretched to 6 days due to complications with my wound healing. The doctors assured me it was normal for some patients, but I felt frustrated being stuck in bed when I wanted to take care of my family. My husband recovered quickly, almost miraculously. By day 4, he was walking the halls and talking about going home. The transplant team was thrilled with how well his body accepted my kidney. "You couldn't have asked for a better match," the transplant coordinator told us. "This kidney should last him decades." Our children visited every day after school, and seeing their father sitting up and joking with them again made every moment of pain worth it. Our daughter brought him drawings she'd made, and our son helped him with crossword puzzles. "Daddy looks normal again," our daughter announced one afternoon, climbing carefully onto his bed. "That's because Mommy made him better," our son said seriously, looking at me with such admiration it broke my heart. The day we both went home was like a celebration. Friends had decorated our house with balloons and cooked enough meals to last us weeks. My husband couldn't stop thanking everyone, telling them how amazing I was, how I'd literally given him a second chance at life. That first night home, as we lay carefully in our own bed, he held my hand in the dark. "I will never ever forget what you did for me," he said quietly. "I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you know how grateful I am." I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? I'd just given him part of my body to save his life. Surely, that created an unbreakable bond between us. The next few months would prove how wrong I was about everything. The first few months after surgery were like a second honeymoon. My husband was attentive in ways he hadn't been since we were newlyweds. He brought me coffee in bed every morning, helped with household chores without being asked, and constantly checked on how I was feeling. "You don't have to keep babying me," I told him one morning as he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry upstairs. "I want to," he said, kissing my forehead. "You gave me everything. Let me take care of you." My recovery was slower than his. While he bounced back to full energy within weeks, I struggled with fatigue and discomfort that seemed to linger. The surgeon assured me this was normal. Donor recovery could take 6 months to a year, but some days I felt like I'd aged years in the span of a few months. "I'm sorry this is taking so long," I said one evening when I had to lie down instead of helping with homework. "Don't you dare apologize," he said firmly. "You saved my life. Whatever you need, however long you need it, I'm here." He took over bedtime routines with the kids, cooked dinner most nights, and handled weekend activities when I was too tired to participate. Friends and family were amazed by his transformation. "He's like a different person," my sister commented during one of her visits. "So attentive, so grateful. Surgery really changed him." It had changed both of us, I thought. Going through something so intense together had deepened our bond in ways I couldn't have imagined. We talked more openly about our fears, our dreams, our love for each other. "I keep thinking about how close we came to losing all this," he said one night as we watched the kids play in the backyard. "I never want to take any of it for granted again." "We won't," I assured him. "We'll appreciate every day." And we did for a while. He planned romantic dates for when I felt well enough. Quiet dinners at home, sunset walks around the neighborhood, movie nights on the couch. Simple things that felt precious because we'd almost lost them. The kids noticed the change too. Their father was present in ways he hadn't been before, engaged and energetic. He helped with science projects, attended school events, and even volunteered to coach our son's little league team. "Dad's so much more fun now," our daughter told me one afternoon as we watched him teaching her to ride a bike without training wheels. "He feels better," I explained. "When you're not sick anymore, everything seems more exciting." By month 3, I was starting to feel more like myself, though I still tired easily. My husband surprised me with a weekend getaway to a bed and breakfast in the mountains. Our first time alone together since the surgery. "This is perfect," I said as we sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky. "You're perfect," he said, taking my hand. "I fall in love with you more every day." "Even with this ugly scar?" I asked, touching my side where the surgical incision had healed into a long pink line. "Especially with that scar," he said seriously. It's proof of how much you love me. We made plans that weekend. Summer vacation to the beach, Christmas in Colorado with his family, maybe even a trip to Europe for our 15th anniversary. Life stretched ahead of us, full of possibility. I used to think I was lucky to have you, he said as we lay in bed our last night there. Now I know I don't deserve you, but I'm going to spend every day trying to. I believed every word. How could I not? This man had seen me at my most vulnerable, had watched me sacrifice my body for his health, had witnessed the depth of my love. Surely that created a bond that nothing could break. 6 months post-surgery, I was finally feeling strong again. We celebrated with dinner at our favorite restaurant, the one where we'd had our first date 15 years earlier. To my hero, he toasted, raising his glass of wine. To us, I corrected, clinking my water glass against his. If only I'd known that was the beginning of the end. The changes started so subtly, I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. It began around the 8-month mark after surgery when my husband started working late more frequently. Big project at the office, he'd explain, loosening his tie as he came home at 9 p.m. instead of his usual 6:30. Sorry, honey. You know how it is. I did know. He worked in marketing for a mid-sized company, and they did have busy periods, but these busy periods seemed to be stretching longer and happening more often. The morning coffee in bed stopped. The thoughtful gestures became less frequent. When I mentioned it gently one evening, he seemed genuinely surprised. I haven't been doing that, he asked, looking confused. I'm sorry. I've been so distracted with work. Things will calm down soon. But they didn't calm down. If anything, the distance grew wider. He started going to the gym after work instead of coming straight home, saying he needed to get back in shape now that he was healthy again. That's great, I told him, trying to be supportive. I'm glad you're feeling so energetic. You should come with me, he suggested half-heartedly. I'm still not cleared for intense exercise, I reminded him. The doctors had said my remaining kidney needed more time to adjust before I could return to vigorous activity. Right. Of course, sorry. But I noticed he didn't offer alternatives. Didn't suggest walks or other activities we could do together. Instead, he'd shower after his workout and retreat to his home office to catch up on emails. The kids noticed, too, though they didn't say anything directly. Our son stopped asking Dad to help with homework, automatically bringing his math problems to me instead. Our daughter began setting the table for 3 instead of 4 on weeknights. Is Daddy working late again? She'd ask when 6:30 came and went. He'll be home soon, I'd promise, though I was no longer certain that was true. When he was home, he seemed restless, always checking his phone, always having somewhere else he needed to be. The man who had spent months being completely present was suddenly scattered and distant. Are you feeling okay? I asked one night as we got ready for bed. You seem different. Different how? I don't know. Distracted maybe. Like your mind is somewhere else. He was quiet for a moment, brushing his teeth with unusual focus. I'm just processing everything. I guess having a second chance at life makes you think about things differently. What kind of things? Just everything. Life choices, opportunities. Don't worry about it. But I did worry. The man who had promised to spend every day showing his gratitude was suddenly acting like he'd forgotten what I'd done for him. Not that I wanted constant praise, but the complete shift in his behavior was unsettling. I tried to talk to my sister about it, but I felt foolish complaining. He's healthy and working and providing for his family, I told her. I should be grateful. You literally gave him a kidney, she said bluntly. You're allowed to expect some basic attention from your husband. 3 weeks later, he announced he was going to a work conference in Chicago for the weekend. This was normal. He'd always traveled occasionally for work, but something felt different this time. Can I come with you? I asked impulsively. Make it a weekend getaway. It's all meetings and networking events, he said quickly. You'd be bored. Besides, the kids need you here. The kids could have easily stayed with my mother, and we both knew it. But I didn't push. He left Friday morning with a new suitcase and came back Sunday night quiet and withdrawn. When I asked how the conference went, he gave vague answers about presentations and meetings. That night, as he showered, his phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it automatically. We'd always been open about our phones, never secretive. The preview showed just a first name and the beginning of a message. Had such a wonderful time. I told myself it was probably a colleague thanking him for something work-related. But a cold feeling settled in my stomach that I couldn't shake. Over the next few weeks, the late nights became more frequent, the explanations more elaborate, and the distance between us grew into a chasm I couldn't seem to bridge. The man I'd literally given part of my body to save was slipping away from me, and I had no idea why. The truth revealed itself on a Tuesday afternoon, 11 months after I'd saved my husband's life. I was at my follow-up appointment with the transplant team, routine blood work to check my remaining kidney function. The appointment ran long, and I found myself downtown during lunch hour, something that rarely happened since I usually scheduled medical visits for mornings. I decided to grab lunch at a small Italian place near the medical center before heading home. As I walked past the window, I saw them. My husband sat across from a woman I'd never seen before, blonde, pretty, probably in her early 30s. But it wasn't just that he was having lunch with another woman. It was how he was looking at her. The same way he used to look at me when we were dating, when we were newlyweds, when I was the center of his universe. He reached across the table and touched her hand. She smiled and leaned in closer. He laughed at something she said, really laughed, in a way I hadn't seen him laugh at home in months. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, people walking around me like I was a statue. My legs felt weak, my stomach churned, and for a moment, I thought I might actually be sick right there on the street. This had to be innocent. A work colleague, maybe a client. There had to be an explanation. But even as I told myself that, I watched him lean forward and kiss her softly on the lips. In broad daylight, in public, like they were a real couple. I stumbled backward and somehow made it to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. I sat there for 20 minutes trying to process what I'd seen, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. When I got home, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I went through his phone. He'd left it charging on the kitchen counter. And I knew his passcode, our anniversary date. We'd never had secrets from each other, or so I thought. The messages were all there, months of them. Her name was Rebecca, and they'd reconnected at that conference in Chicago. She was someone he'd known in college, his first love, the one who got away. Can't stop thinking about last weekend. Read one message from 3 days ago. You make me feel alive again, read another. I never stopped loving you, said one from him. I scrolled back through weeks and weeks of messages, my heart breaking with each one. They'd been meeting for lunch, for drinks, for entire weekends when he claimed to be at work events. They'd been planning a future together. I know this is complicated because of everything she did for me, he'd written in one message. But I can't keep pretending to be grateful for something I never asked for. Something he never asked for. My kidney, my sacrifice, my love. The final message exchange was from that morning. Rebecca, when are you going to tell her? I just need to figure out the right way. She's been through so much. Rebecca, we deserve to be happy. You deserve to live the life you want, not the one you feel obligated to live. You're right. I love you, Rebecca. Rebecca, I love you too. I set the phone down with shaking hands and walked to the bathroom where I vomited until there was nothing left in my stomach. 11 months ago, this man had held my hand as I signed papers to give him part of my body. He'd cried with gratitude, promised to love me forever, sworn he'd never take our life together for granted again. And now he was planning to leave me for someone else. Someone who made him feel alive in ways that apparently I no longer could. I sat on the bathroom floor and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I got up, washed my face, and went to pick up our children from school because life had to keep going, even when your world was falling apart. That evening, I made dinner, helped with homework, and pretended everything was normal. When he came home at 9 p.m. with another story about working late, I smiled and asked about his day. Fine, he said, barely looking at me. Just busy. I watched him eat the dinner I'd made, watched him ruffle our son's hair, watched him kiss our daughter goodnight. This man who was living a lie, who was planning to abandon the family I'd sacrificed my health to preserve. That night, As he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned what I was going to say when I confronted him. I just had no idea how much worse it was going to get. I waited 3 days to confront him. 3 days of watching him lie to my face. 3 days of pretending I didn't know he was destroying our family. 3 days of him coming home from dates with another woman and kissing me goodnight like nothing had changed. On Friday evening, after the kids were in bed, I was ready. "We need to talk," I said as he settled into his chair with his laptop, probably to text Rebecca. "Sure. What about?" He didn't even look up from his screen. I placed printed screenshots of his text messages on the coffee table in front of him. About Rebecca. The color drained from his face, but he recovered quickly. I'll give him credit for that. He'd become an excellent liar over the past few months. "I can explain," he said, closing his laptop. "Please do," I said, sitting down across from him. My hands folded in my lap like I was conducting a business meeting instead of confronting my cheating husband. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him calculating what to say. How much truth he had to admit to now that he'd been caught. "Rebecca and I, we have history," he finally said. "We dated in college. She was my first love." "I know who she is," I said. "I read the messages. All of them." He winced. "I didn't mean for this to happen." But it did happen. For months. While I was recovering from surgery to save your life, you were planning to leave me for her. "It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Explain how it's not that simple." He stood up and started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "When I almost died, it changed me. It made me realize I was living the wrong life. Settling for less than what I really wanted. I felt like he'd slapped me. Settling. That came out wrong." He stopped pacing and looked at me. I realized I never got closure with Rebecca. She was the one that got away. And when I saw her at the conference, all those feelings came rushing back. "So you decided to have an affair?" "I decided to explore what might have been." "While married to the woman who gave you a kidney?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that I'll never forget as long as I live. "I never asked you to do that." The words hung in the air between us like poison. I stared at him, waiting for him to take it back, to apologize, to show some recognition of what he just said. He didn't. "You never asked me to save your life," I repeated slowly. "I would have preferred to wait for a donor from the list. You insisted on getting tested. You insisted on the surgery. I was dying. People wait for kidneys all the time. I could have managed on dialysis." I felt something break inside me. Something that had been holding me together through this entire nightmare conversation. "So my sacrifice means nothing to you." "It means you made a choice," he said. "But it doesn't mean I owe you my entire life." I stood up on shaking legs. "Get out." "What?" "Get out of this house tonight. Go to Rebecca since that's where you want to be anyway. We need to talk about this rationally. There are the kids to consider. Finance, logistics." "The kids?" I laughed, and it sounded hysterical even to me. "You mean the children you're abandoning? The ones who watched their mother sacrifice her health to save their father's life?" "I'm not abandoning them. I'll always be their father." "Will you?" "Because the man I married, the father they knew, would never do this." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Maybe that man was never real. Maybe he was just someone I thought I had to be. And this is who you really are. Someone who takes a kidney and gives nothing in return." "I'm someone who deserves to be happy." I walked to the front door and opened it. "Then go be happy. But don't you dare come back here acting like you're the victim in this." He gathered his laptop and keys, pausing at the door. "I'll call you tomorrow so we can figure out how to tell the kids." "Don't bother," I said. "I'll tell them their father abandoned us for another woman. They deserve the truth." "That's not fair." "Fair." I touched the scar on my side, still visible through my thin pajama top. "Fair would have been you remembering what I did for you before you decided to throw our life away." He left without another word. I closed the door behind him and slid down to sit on the floor, my back against the wood. Upstairs, my children slept peacefully, unaware that their world had just shattered. And I realized that saving someone's life doesn't guarantee they'll value yours in return. He called the next morning while I was making pancakes for the kids, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy before their world collapsed. "We need to talk about how to handle this," he said, his voice businesslike, as if we were discussing a work project instead of the destruction of our family. "Where are you?" I asked. "At Rebecca's apartment." Of course he was. Less than 12 hours after walking out on his family, he was already playing house with his college girlfriend. "The kids are asking where you are. I told them you had to travel for work. We need to sit down together and explain this properly." "Explain what exactly?" "That you decided our life together wasn't good enough anymore." "It's more complicated than that." "No, it's really not," I said, flipping a pancake with more force than necessary. "You fell in love with someone else and decided to leave your wife and children. It's actually very simple." He was quiet for a moment. "I want to see the kids this weekend." "Fine, you can pick them up Saturday morning and explain to them why Daddy isn't living here anymore." That weekend was the hardest thing I'd ever experienced, and that includes major surgery. Watching my children's faces as their father explained that he was going through some changes and needed some space to figure things out was heartbreaking. Our daughter, always direct, asked, "Are you getting divorced?" He looked at me, then back at her. "Mommy and I are taking a break to think about what's best for everyone." Our son, older and more perceptive, wasn't buying it. "Did you do something bad, Dad?" "It's complicated, buddy. Sometimes adults need to make difficult decisions." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them the truth. That their father was a selfish man who'd forgotten that their mother had saved his life. But I held my tongue for their sake. Over the next few weeks, the pattern became clear. He'd pick up the kids every other weekend and one evening a week for dinner, playing the role of devoted father for a few hours before returning them to me. Meanwhile, I was handling everything. Homework, bedtime routines, doctor's appointments, school events, grocery shopping, bill paying, all while processing my own grief and dealing with persistent health issues related to my surgery. "I'm tired all the time," I told my doctor during a follow-up appointment. "More tired than I should be." "Stress can definitely impact recovery," she said gently. "How are you handling everything at home?" "I'm managing." What else could I say? That my husband had abandoned me after I gave him a kidney. The divorce proceedings began a month later. He hired an expensive attorney and immediately started protecting his assets. The man who had once promised to spend his life showing gratitude for my sacrifice was now fighting me over every piece of furniture, every investment account. He's claiming that your medical decision was made independently and shouldn't factor into asset division. My lawyer told me during our first meeting. My medical decision to save his life? Unfortunately, organ donation is considered a voluntary gift under the law. It doesn't create additional financial obligation. I stared at her. So the fact that I gave him a kidney means nothing legally? Not in terms of property division. No. During our first mediation session, he sat across from me with his lawyer, looking healthy and confident. My kidney had given him this new life, this energy to start over, and he was using it to destroy everything we'd built together. "My client is prepared to offer standard custody arrangements," his lawyer said. "Every other weekend and one evening per week." "That's generous," my lawyer replied sarcastically. I looked at my husband, my ex-husband. I had to start thinking of him that way. "Do you remember what you said to me the night before surgery? That you'd spend every day of your life showing me how grateful you were?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. People say things when they're scared. I wasn't scared. I meant every word I said to you. "This isn't about gratitude," he said quietly. "This is about moving forward." "With Rebecca?" "Yes, with Rebecca." 3 months into the divorce process, he announced that Rebecca was pregnant. My children came home from a weekend visit with the news that they were going to have a half-sibling. "Are you okay, Mom?" our daughter asked, studying my face carefully. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I lied. "Are you okay with the news?" She shrugged. "I guess. Dad seems happy." Happy? The man who had my kidney inside his body was creating a new family, while dismantling the one I'd sacrificed my health to preserve. That night, I called my sister and cried for 2 hours straight. He's having a baby with her, I sobbed. I know, honey. I know. I gave him a kidney. I literally gave him part of my body, and he's having a baby with another woman. He's a monster, she said fiercely. And someday he'll realize what he threw away. But I wasn't sure he ever would. Some people, I was learning, are incapable of true gratitude. They take and take and take, and when you have nothing left to give, they move on to someone who does. The house felt impossibly empty without him, which was ironic since he'd been absent emotionally for months before he actually left. But now the silence was official. The abandonment complete. My health began to deteriorate in ways the doctors hadn't warned me about. The fatigue wasn't just from stress. It was from my remaining kidney working overtime to do the job that 2 kidneys should be doing. My blood pressure spiked, requiring medication I'd never needed before. I developed protein in my urine, a sign that my kidney was struggling. This isn't uncommon, the nephrologist assured me during an emergency appointment when my blood pressure hit dangerous levels. Living with 1 kidney puts additional strain on your cardiovascular system, especially during times of high stress. High stress, that was one way to put it. Will these problems go away when things settle down at home? She looked at me with kind but honest eyes. Some of these changes may be permanent. We'll need to monitor you closely for the rest of your life. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot after that appointment and wondered if it had all been worth it. I'd saved my husband's life at the cost of my own long-term health, and he'd repaid me by walking away without a backward glance. The kids were struggling too, though they tried to hide it. Our son's grades dropped, and he started having nightmares. Our daughter became clingy, afraid to let me out of her sight. Is it my fault Daddy left? She asked one night as I tucked her into bed. Oh, sweetheart, no. This has nothing to do with you or your brother. This is about choices Daddy made. But maybe if we'd been better. Stop right there, I said firmly, sitting on her bed. You and your brother are perfect exactly as you are. Sometimes adults make selfish decisions that hurt the people who love them. That's not your fault. But I could see she didn't entirely believe me. How could she? In her 8-year-old mind, families were supposed to stay together. When they didn't, someone had to be to blame. Friends tried to help, but their sympathy often made me feel worse. The story of what I'd done for him, and how he'd repaid me spread through our social circle like wildfire. I just can't believe it, my neighbor said when she brought over a casserole. After you gave him a kidney. What kind of person does that? The kind of person I married, I said bitterly. Some friends picked sides. Most chose mine, which should have felt validating, but instead made me feel like a charity case. Others, particularly couple friends we'd known for years, simply disappeared. Divorce made people uncomfortable, especially one this dramatic. My mother flew in to help with the kids while I recovered from a particularly bad episode where my blood pressure landed me in the emergency room. You should have let him die, she said bluntly as she made dinner one evening. I'm serious. Look what he's done to you. To those babies upstairs. You'd all be better off if you'd never met him. But that wasn't true. And we both knew it. Without him, I wouldn't have our children. And despite everything, they were worth every moment of pain. The worst part was lying awake at night, feeling the ache in my side where they had removed my kidney and thinking about how that organ was keeping him alive, so he could build a new life with someone else. My sacrifice had given him the health and energy to destroy our family. I started going to therapy, something I'd never thought I'd need. The therapist, a gentle woman in her 60s, listened to my story with professional calm. You're grieving multiple losses, she explained. Your marriage, your health, your sense of identity as a wife, and you're also processing betrayal trauma. The violation of trust that occurred when someone you sacrificed for abandoned you. I keep wondering if I was naive to expect gratitude. Expecting basic human decency isn't naive. What you did was extraordinary. His response says everything about his character and nothing about the value of your gesture. But understanding it intellectually didn't make it hurt less. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with panic attacks, my heart racing with the knowledge that I'd literally given part of my body to someone who'd thrown me away like garbage. 6 months after he left, Rebecca had the baby. The kids came home from a weekend visit with pictures on their phones of their new half-brother. "He's really cute," our daughter said carefully, watching my face. "I'm sure he is," I managed to say. "Are you excited to be a big sister?" She nodded, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. This was her father's son, but not mine. Another reminder of the family he'd chosen over us. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in my empty bedroom and wondered how much more I could take. Every day was a struggle, medically, emotionally, financially. I was raising 2 children alone while dealing with health problems caused by the sacrifice I'd made for a man who no longer cared if I lived or died. But somehow, I had to keep going because those 2 children upstairs needed me to be strong, even when I felt like I was falling apart. The divorce was finalized 8 months after he walked out, but the legal battles were far from over. He fought me on everything: child support, alimony, division of assets. The man who had once promised to spend his life thanking me was now using expensive lawyers to minimize what he owed the family he'd abandoned. He's claiming that your medical issues are pre-existing and unrelated to the kidney donation, my lawyer informed me during one of our many meetings. That's completely false. I was perfectly healthy before the surgery. I know that, and you know that. But proving the connection between your current health problems and the donation is complicated. His attorney is arguing that stress from the divorce is causing your medical issues, not the surgery. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Yes, I was stressed because the man I'd saved was trying to destroy me financially while building a new life with someone else. The custody hearings were particularly brutal. He painted himself as the stable parent with a steady income and a new family, while portraying me as the bitter ex-wife trying to poison the children against him. "My client simply wants what's best for his children," his lawyer argued. "He's remarried to a wonderful woman. They have a new baby and they can provide a stable, loving home. Your client abandoned his family after his wife donated a kidney to save his life," my lawyer countered. "He's shown a pattern of selfishness and ingratitude that calls his judgment into question." The judge looked tired, like he'd heard too many ugly divorce cases. While the circumstances of this divorce are unusual, I have to focus on what's in the best interests of the children moving forward. In the end, he got exactly what he'd asked for: every other weekend and 1 evening per week. Standard custody for a man who destroyed his family for another woman. The financial settlement was equally disappointing. Despite the fact that I had literally given him part of my body, despite my ongoing medical expenses, despite the fact that I was now a single mother with health problems, the court treated it like any other divorce. "You'll receive alimony for 5 years, my lawyer explained. Child support until they're 18, and 50% of the marital assets. What about my medical expenses? The ongoing costs of monitoring my kidney function? Those aren't considered his responsibility. The donation was voluntary." Voluntary, as if I had casually decided to undergo major surgery for fun, not to save my husband's life. The house had to be sold. I couldn't afford the mortgage on my limited income, especially with mounting medical bills. Watching strangers walk through the home where I'd raised my children, where I'd recovered from surgery, where I'd discovered my husband's betrayal, was heartbreaking. "We can find a nice apartment," I told the kids as we packed up their rooms. "Something smaller, but it'll be ours." Our son, now 11, was old enough to understand the financial implications. "Is this because Dad doesn't pay enough?" "This is because our situation changed," I said carefully. "But we'll be fine. We'll make it work." The apartment I could afford was in a different school district, which meant the kids had to change schools in the middle of the year. Another disruption, another loss to add to the pile. Meanwhile, he bought a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood with Rebecca and their new baby. The kids came back from visits talking about the pool, the big backyard, the nursery decorated with expensive furniture. Rebecca made us pancakes shaped like animals, our daughter reported after one weekend visit. "That sounds fun," I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "She's really nice, Mom. She asks about you sometimes." "What does she ask?" "Just how you're doing. If you're feeling better." The irony was incredible. The woman who'd helped destroy my marriage was now expressing concern for my well-being. 2 years after the divorce was final, He took me back to court requesting reduced child support. Rebecca had quit her job to stay home with the baby, and they claimed financial hardship. He wants to pay less while I'm dealing with increased medical expenses. I told my new lawyer I'd had to find a cheaper one. Unfortunately, child support is calculated based on current income, not past circumstances. Past circumstances? I gave him a kidney. I understand your frustration, but the court has already ruled on the property division. This hearing is specifically about child support modification. In the end, his payments were reduced by 30%. The man whose life I'd saved was now paying less to support the children we'd created together, because he'd chosen to have another family. I sat in my car after that hearing and wondered if there was any justice in the world. I'd made the ultimate sacrifice for love, and I was being punished for it over and over again. But as I drove to pick up my kids from school, I realized something important. I might not be able to get justice from the courts, but I could still get justice from life itself. I just didn't know it would come so soon. The phone call came on a rainy Thursday morning, 3 years after our divorce was finalized. It was my former sister-in-law, the one person from his family who'd maintained contact with me. I thought you should know, she said quietly. He's in the hospital. The kidney? My kidney? It's failing. I felt the world tilt. What do you mean failing? Rejection. It started about 6 months ago, but they thought they could manage it with medication. Now they're saying he needs to go back on dialysis immediately. 6 months ago. He'd been dealing with kidney failure for 6 months and hadn't told the children. They'd been visiting him every other weekend, not knowing their father was dying again. How bad is it? Bad. They're talking about putting him back on the transplant list. But at his age with this medical history, the chances aren't good. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the medical bills scattered across my table. Bills for my ongoing care, for the blood pressure medication I'd need for the rest of my life, for the quarterly screenings to monitor my remaining kidney. My body had rejected him years ago. Now his body was rejecting mine. I didn't tell the kids immediately. Our son was now 14, our daughter 12. They were finally stable, doing well in school, adjusting to our new life. But I knew they had a right to know their father was sick again. Is he going to die? Our daughter asked when I finally explained the situation. I don't know, sweetheart. The doctors are doing everything they can. Are you going to give him another kidney? Our son asked. The question hit me like a physical blow. I can't. You can only donate once, and I only have one kidney left. Would you if you could? He pressed. I looked at this young man who was so much like his father in appearance, but thankfully nothing like him in character. That's not something I need to think about because it's not possible. But privately I wondered, would I? Would I sacrifice my remaining kidney for the man who'd abandoned us? Would I die to save the life of someone who'd shown me such cruelty? I honestly didn't know. And that uncertainty troubled me. 2 weeks later, the kids came home from what turned out to be their last visit with him. He was too sick to take them anymore. Dad wants to see you, our son said as soon as he walked in the door. He asked us to give you this. Our daughter handed me a handwritten note. The handwriting was shaky, nothing like his usual confident script. The note was brief. Please come. I need to talk to you. Room 314, City General. I stared at the paper for a long time. Part of me wanted to throw it away and pretend I'd never received it. But another part, the part that had loved him for 15 years and sacrificed my health to save him, felt compelled to go. I went the next evening after the kids were in bed. The hospital smelled the same as it had 4 years ago when we'd undergone surgery together. But everything else was different. He looked terrible. Gray skin, sunken eyes, the same appearance he'd had when his kidneys first failed. My kidney, the one I'd given him, was killing him slowly through rejection. But I wasn't alone in the room. Rebecca sat beside his bed, holding his hand, looking exhausted and worried. She was older now, no longer the young woman who'd stolen my husband. Motherhood and stress had aged her, just as betrayal and illness had aged me. She looked up when I appeared in the doorway. And for a moment, we just stared at each other. The woman who'd saved him and the woman who'd taken him. I'll give you some privacy, she said quietly, standing up. No, I said. You don't need to leave. I'm not staying long. He tried to sit up straighter when he saw me. You came. The kids asked me to. Thank you. We looked at each other across the space of years and betrayal and unforgivable hurt. He was dying again. And this time, I couldn't save him. Wouldn't save him. I wanted to apologize, he said weakly. For which part? All of it. Everything. The way I treated you, the way I left, the things I said. I was quiet for a moment, studying this man who'd once been my whole world. Are you sorry because you're dying, or are you sorry because you realize what you did was wrong? Both. I guess that's not good enough. Rebecca was standing by the window now, trying to give us space while staying close to the man she loved, the man she'd stolen, the man who was dying despite the piece of me that was inside him. I know you hate me, he said. I don't hate you. I pity you. You had everything. A wife who loved you enough to give you part of her body, beautiful children, a good life, and you threw it all away for what? A chance to relive your college years. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And now you're dying anyway, despite everything I sacrificed for you. I turned to leave, then stopped. The kids need stability. Whatever happens to you, make sure Rebecca knows she's responsible for them when they're with you. Don't make them take care of you while you're dying. I will. Good. I walked out without looking back, leaving them to face his death together, just like I'd faced his betrayal alone. He died 6 weeks after our last conversation. The kidney rejection had progressed too rapidly for any intervention. My kidney, the one I'd freely given him, essentially killed him in the end. His body's final rejection of what I'd offered in love. The funeral was surreal. I sat in the back with our children, watching Rebecca and their toddler son in the front row. She was now a widow at 35, raising a child alone, just like I was, though her circumstances were different. Our son, now 15 and wise beyond his years, leaned over and whispered, "Are you okay, Mom?" "I'm fine," I whispered back. And surprisingly, I meant it. I wasn't devastated by his death. I'd grieved the loss of my husband years ago when he walked out. This was just the end of a story that had already concluded for me. After the service, Rebecca approached me hesitantly. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I came for my children." "I know, but still. Thank you." We looked at each other for a moment. Two women who'd loved the same flawed man, who'd both paid prices for that love. "I want you to know," she said. "He talked about you at the end. About what you did for him. He knew he'd made a terrible mistake." "Did he?" "Yes. He said you were the best person he'd ever known, and he'd been too stupid to appreciate it." I nodded. It was something, I suppose. Not enough, but something. The years that followed were different than I'd expected. Without his presence looming over our lives, through custody visits, child support battles, and legal proceedings, we found peace. My health stabilized somewhat. The blood pressure medication kept my cardiovascular system under control, and regular monitoring showed my remaining kidney functioning well. I'd live with the consequences of my sacrifice forever, but they were manageable. The kids thrived. Our son got into a good college and chose to study medicine, saying he wanted to help people the way doctors had helped our family. Our daughter grew into a fierce, independent young woman who said she'd never let any man treat her the way her father had treated me. "You taught me what real love looks like," she told me on her 18th birthday. "Not the fake kind that Dad had with Rebecca, but the kind that gives everything and expects nothing back." I found love again eventually. A kind man who worked as a teacher, who understood that my first responsibility was always to my children, who admired rather than resented the scar on my side. He knew my story and said it showed him what kind of person I was, someone capable of extraordinary sacrifice for the people I loved. "You gave him 5 extra years of life," he said one evening as we walked through the park. 5 years with his children. 5 years to hopefully become a better person. 5 years he wouldn't have had without you. 5 years he used to hurt me and abandon our family. That's on him, not on you. You did something incredible out of love. What he did with that gift says everything about his character and nothing about yours. Now, at 45, I understand what I learned through this experience. Love, real love, isn't transactional. When I gave him my kidney, I didn't do it because I expected something in return. I did it because I loved him. Because I wanted him to live. Because I couldn't imagine a world without him in it. The tragedy isn't that I saved someone who didn't deserve it. The tragedy is that he was too broken to appreciate what he'd been given. Not just my kidney, but years of love, devotion, and sacrifice. Rebecca remarried 2 years after he died. She sent me a card when their son graduated from high school, thanking me again for the sacrifice that had given her stepson extra years with his father. It was a kind gesture from someone who understood the complicated nature of what had happened between us. My children both know the full story now. They understand that their mother gave their father part of her body to save his life, and that he repaid that sacrifice with betrayal and abandonment. But they also understand that my choice to save him wasn't a mistake, even knowing how it would end. Would you do it again? My son asked me recently, now a medical student himself. Yes, I answered without hesitation. Not because he deserved it, but because love doesn't calculate worth. Real love gives freely without conditions, without guarantees. The physical scar on my side has faded over the years, but it's still visible. Sometimes I catch myself touching it absently, remembering. Not with bitterness anymore, but with something approaching peace. I saved a man's life, and he used that life to hurt me. But I also raised 2 incredible children who learned about sacrifice and dignity and unconditional love by watching how I handled the worst betrayal imaginable. In the end, that's worth more than his gratitude ever could have been. The kidney I gave him lasted exactly 5 years. The lesson I taught my children about love and sacrifice will last their lifetimes. I know which gift was more valuable. And sometimes late at night when the house is quiet, I touch that scar and smile because I know who I am. I'm someone who loved so deeply that I literally gave part of myself to save another person's life. Not everyone can say that. And not everyone would want to.